Welcome to this recording of Oriental and Occidental Christianity. This insightful class was originally given by Paramahansa Yogananda for self-realization students in 1926. We are honored to share his divine insights and timeless wisdom with you today. Spirit is the infinite reservoir of wisdom. Each human life is a channel through which that divine wisdom is steadily flowing. Some channels are wide and others narrow. The larger the channel, the greater the flow of God power. We are unique channels, for it lies within our power to make ourselves narrower or wider. We have been given freedom of will and the power of choice. Some choke the channel of their lives with the mud of accumulated ignorance, never allowing themselves to be cleansed by the dredge of knowledge. The ocean of truth attempts fruitlessly to flood in greater volume through such narrow openings. There are others who keep on digging, widening, deepening the channels of their lives by self-discipline and culture, thus inviting an ever larger volume of God wisdom to pass through. Jesus the Christ was one of the greatest channels through which the cosmic wisdom flowed. We must remember that each channel is finite and has its limitations. I dare say there shall never be born a prophet who can contain or exhaust the whole ocean of truth in his short span of life. Other prophets shall always come to express truth anew. Though infinite truth must thus suffer measurement even at the hands of prophets, these great souls nevertheless serve to widen the channels of smaller lives, inundating those shores with their unbounded wisdom. True Christianity, the divine principles taught by Christ, should not be confused with some of the forms that cloak it. True Christianity is neither Oriental nor Occidental, nor is it the teaching of Jesus and his saints alone. Its eternal principles belong to every truth-seeking soul. Jesus, the Son of Man, lifted himself to the state of being a Son of God. That is, he rose above ordinary human consciousness and entered the cosmic Christ consciousness, the pure reflection of God present in all creation. When St. John said that, "As many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God," he meant that anyone who could receive that Christ consciousness, who could increase the capacity of his consciousness to hold that infinite ocean of truth, would become, as did Jesus, a Son of God, one with the Father. This offers hope to every seeking heart, for there would be no incentive in following the example of Jesus if we could not be like him. Jesus was not sent to us to symbolize an unattainable goal. He came as a living inspiration, demonstrating what we all may successfully seek and achieve. If God created all men in his image, as stated in the Bible, he could not give more to one than he gives to all the rest. He cannot be accused of partiality, which would make him less divine. We are all his children, created by the power of his being, endowed with that power to become his true sons. Nor did God alone make Jesus the spiritual giant that he was. If God creates prophets as unique beings, ready-made in a spiritual factory, then we might justly think it needless to struggle, and would expect him to remold us and do our spiritual thinking for us. The gift of reason and choice, the power to exercise free will, is peculiar to man and is sufficient to demonstrate to us that we must acquire our own spiritual growth by individual effort and achievement. Jesus struggled, fasted, prayed, disciplined himself in every way. We admire Jesus the more that being born a human, he became divine. Spiritual truth is one. Interpreted by Christians, it is called Christianity, by Hindus, Hinduism, and so forth. Narrow-mindedness confines religion to church or temple worship and sectarian beliefs, mistaking the form for the spirit. Truth has suffered constriction in all interpretations, narrow and liberal. We must reach the goal of self-realization of truth, wherein man-made interpretations no longer limit us. The aim of self-realization is to teach the practical methods, the exact techniques of widening the channel of human consciousness so that truth might flow in continuously, endlessly, without obstructions of dogma or unproved beliefs. Yogoda points out not only the words and personalities of saints and prophets, but the path of concentration on a practical system. It teaches the step-by-step progression from belief to personal realization and individual attainment of divinity. Oriental conditions of life were different. Sell all ye have and give to the poor. Take no heed for the morrow, what ye shall eat, what ye shall put on, and other spiritual injunctions of Jesus would not admit of strict practical application in the Occident today. What Jesus preached can be understood only by developing the inner consciousness, spiritualizing the inner self. Christianity originally placed less emphasis on the outer formalities of religion. Jesus taught an Oriental people in an Oriental setting and atmosphere. The truths he spoke were interpreted by the Oriental mentalities that surrounded him. If the New Testament had been written by Jesus rather than his disciples, it would have been very different. The spiritual experiences of the biblical characters, however transcendental or intuitional when expressed through Oriental mentality and terminology, took on an Oriental hue. Soul experiences cannot be fully expressed through words, and when language half lisps them, they assume a distinguishing individual stamp. The shunning of all material possessions as taught by Jesus was especially applicable to and possible in those times and conditions. If Jesus were preaching today to Americans, his essential message would be the same, but expressed differently than 2,000 years ago. To a people in a land where living conditions and climatic and social factors made it possible to live much more simply than is generally practical today. Then, a little labor would suffice to gain the necessities of life. The warm climate simplified the problem of clothing and housing. Less attention was needed for the physical side of life. Oriental Christianity taught plain living, outdoor living, meditating on the lap of Mother Nature. Jesus did not preach a mode of living far removed from the customary life of that day, nor would he today advocate a radical change in our routine of life. This is a different age. The purposes of the Creator demand that the world's evolution proceed through ever new and varied conditions. So Jesus would not concentrate today on a drastic departure from the practical forms and conditions of our life. Now, as then, he would point out that formalities of life are secondary, that the only worthwhile change, the only permanent advance, is the inner evolution of man toward spiritual perfection. The outer conditions of life will never be perfect until the inner condition is perfect. The effect cannot precede the cause. Christ's teaching, interpreted by and adapted to Occidentals, is thus different, and this we can call Occidental Christianity. Through a misunderstanding of Christ's teachings, his early followers conceived a contempt for and disregard of the progress of material life. They did not attempt to translate inner growth into outer achievement. This has been the case throughout the Orient generally. But God's laws do not respect any man-made interpretation. Whenever and wherever man, as a Christian or Hindu, or as any race, breaks God's physical, mental, or spiritual laws that govern the spiritual, mental, social, industrial, and materially progressive conditions of life, he is punished with war, plague, famine, material poverty, and spiritual ignorance. History teaches us that man must develop his life in an all-round manner, neglecting neither the physical nor the mental and spiritual sides if he would achieve perfection. Why Christianity changed in the West? However, we must admit that because of a spiritual emphasis, the Orient generally, and India in particular, has been the breeding ground of the world's greatest prophets and saints: Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Shankara, Chaitanya, my master and Param Gurus, and many others. Strangely, we do not find in the West any prophet of such eminence. If we could take statistics of the world's mentalities, we would find that in general the Orientals are more spiritually inclined and the Westerners more materially and industrially minded. That is why Oriental Christianity, as taught by Jesus and his disciples, underwent a distinct change in form after arriving in the Occident. Jesus' exhortation to the Oriental multitude, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," was changed for all practical purposes in the West to "Seek ye bread first, and the kingdom of God later." "Sell all ye have, and give to the poor," became "Buy all ye can at cost price, then sell at top price and invest wisely the surplus." But even if people today desired to carry out literally the instructions given by Jesus to those of his time, they would not be able to do so with a good conscience. Family responsibilities in most cases would prevent a man from selling all his goods and giving the money to the poor. If he took no heed for the morrow, what ye shall eat, what ye shall put on, he would not be acting correctly toward those dependent on him who have a right to expect his support and protection. But the fact that people in the more complicated modern world cannot always follow literally the precepts given by Jesus does not prevent them from being in every respect true Christians, following faithfully the inner teachings and true essence of Christianity. They can spiritualize their ambition and their wealth by using them for the good of others. They can avoid the greed of luxury and satisfy only their real needs. Jesus was able to preach to the multitudes on mountaintops and other outdoor places. News of his meetings spread by word of mouth, for in his day people did not depend on newspapers. But such delightful freedom from hall rents and advertising expenditure is not possible today. The teacher may be willing to preach on the mountaintop covered with snow or inaccessible by subway or bus, but the audience is not willing to come there to hear him. In the West, they want large, steam-heated, and centrally located meeting places. So the teacher who is sincerely desirous of sowing the seeds of spirituality in the hearts of the multitude ought to be willing also to accept the conditions of life in the country and age in which he finds himself. As Bruce Barton has pointed out in his wonderful book, The Man Nobody Knows, Jesus would employ the methods of the successful businessman. He would be a large user of newspaper columns as a means of communication, for example, if he were preaching today in America. The means do not greatly matter. Getting the message to the people is the main thing. Costly big churches have to be erected today to house the religious multitudes, with consequent concentration on financial problems. Once a man came to me after my first lecture in his city and said, "Swami, many times I have come to different lectures here, sat on one of those hard, uncomfortable chairs of the auditorium, and been forced to leave after a half hour of discomfort. But tonight, I am glad to tell you, your sermon completely erased the hard chair consciousness from my mind during the whole 2 hours. Just the same, you should arrange always to provide your audience with comfortable seats, as otherwise, an American audience will not stay." Real God communion is needed. Churches in the Occident have done untold good by their efforts to remind people of their spiritual obligations and of God's laws. But churches have become form-bound, lacking in the spirit of deep meditation and real God communion that Jesus and his disciples so plainly manifested in their lives. Today, the congregation at church is there in body, but in mind, it is often somewhere else. During the sermon or at the time of prayer, how many are thinking instead of the chicken dinner awaiting them, or of a business deal? Such mental waywardness is not the fault of the churchgoer, for he has never been taught the art of directing his mind, of withdrawing it from the realm of sense distraction and focusing it on God. Indeed, the average man does not even know or believe that it is possible for him to communicate personally with God. God can be contacted by the practice of specific techniques of concentration and meditation on the cosmic vibration. He will become as real and near as one's own thoughts and body. Religionists limit truth by claiming to monopolize it, one calling the other heathen. Many Christians think the Hindu and the Buddhist to be heathens. The Hindu and the Buddhist, if bigoted and lacking in religious courtesy, feel the same about the Christian. But true religion is not exclusive. Its essence is twofold. First and most important, it consists of certain inner principles of attunement with God that make life progressive, permanently happy, and beautiful in every way. Secondly, it has material and mental forms of routine and discipline that are required to bring those inner principles into manifestation in man's material life. Religious customs and forms are like husks, necessary to protect the kernel of truth. But if the husk covers no seed of life, it is useless, barren. The sacraments, conch shells, temple bells, the cross, the crescent, such exteriorizations have been necessary to symbolize certain spiritual truths. But with time, people's minds became concentrated on the form of the service or ritual, the personality of the preacher or priest and his method of delivery, the architecture and size of the church or temple, the number of followers and their social status and possessions. On the other hand, those with iconoclastic ideas want to destroy all form. Their error is that their zeal to do away with form is itself concentration on form, or outer precepts. Thus, the symbols and outer forms of religion act as red flags to excite the bull of religious fanaticism. Yogoda offers a remedy, a solution. It asks the different religionists to live together in harmony by concentrating on the one reality behind form, the truth that is the kernel of every religion. Yogoda has come not to unite all churches and religions into one church and one form, nor to destroy individual expressions of religion, but to show the scientific methods by which the utility and truth of the church and creed may be proven and demonstrated. Change of religious customs, or fusion of all forms into one common form, would not alter the essential religious attitude. Nothing but proven truth, religious truth that has been tested and experienced individually, will ever satisfy completely the mind of man and do away with religious bigotry and ignorance. East and West need balance. In the West, because of the lack of scientific methods for directly perceiving truth, there has not been an overwhelming interest in spiritual inquiry and research. On the other hand, in India, where a host of saints and men of realization have testified to the truth that all men may know God through a definite series of steps and methods of concentration and meditation, we find that religion has always played a prominent part in the daily life of the multitude. But East and West alike suffer from overdevelopment of one phase of life and underdevelopment of other phases. India, in her religious one-sidedness, broke God's laws governing the material part of life, and as a consequence has had to suffer from famine and plague. In the West, worship of the god of wealth and ignorance of God's spiritual laws have produced nations without inward peace, manifesting outwardly in the horrors of the World War. Thus, East and West have failed in one respect and succeeded in another. Wise men of the East have a wealth of spiritual insight and peace that no outward circumstances of suffering can destroy. And materially scientific men of the West have conquered plague and famine. Each needs the other's help to achieve perfection. Westerners need not blow up their factories, give up their banks and businesses, and retire to the jungle in order to be spiritual. But they can accept the scientific methods of inner realization from the East, and can pursue their progressive worldly activities for the good of others instead of for selfish purposes. Nor need the East accept wholesale the industrial materialistic methods of the West. All that is necessary is an acceptance of the Western spirit of progress and development in reference to the betterment of material life. Thus, each may benefit by the example and teachings of the other. The East must see the supreme in wholesome, progressive material things of life, and the West must not forget the spiritual goal in its enthusiasm for worldly activity. A balance must be struck. No matter what religion you follow, ask yourself, am I happy? Am I making others happy? Have I found the answer to the supreme question of life? What is my highest duty? How can I find peace and bliss? Yogoda Self-Realization Fellowship Teachings provides a practical technique of God realization, of spiritualizing the body cells through a definite system of physical development, of keeping in touch with the supreme source of cosmic supply that governs all aspects of our material and spiritual life. This is the practical message for which Occidentals have been hungering. Those who are not content with blind belief and long to prove truth through their own personal experience. This is the message, one of actual God communion, that will fill again the empty churches. People today frequent the movie houses, but the churches are comparatively empty. Why? Because there is something tangible to interest and delight the mind in the former. The Yogoda science of meditation will supply this interest in the latter. It will show each seeker that the most interesting thing in all the world is the bliss God within. It will give him the key to enter into this realm of unparalleled joys. All the pursuits of life offer only partial happiness, even if crowned with utmost fulfillment. But in finding God, we have the reservoir of perennial, unending, unsatiating bliss. For he can give what the whole universe cannot give. He is the whole. The universe is but a part of him. Knowing God scientifically. Once Occidentals know real communion with this great bliss God, their whole attitude toward religion and the church will change. No sermon will be dull then, no church empty. Seekers will hold the key to prove the truth of his existence. They will be listening to words about one whom they have experienced and know to be true, to be near, to be living. They will be devotees of God because they have met him, and not because theoretically it seems that such a being exists and should be worshipped. Nothing can ever fully satisfy the heart of man except living proof. Yogoda brings that proof to man's door. Just as it is necessary for the astronomer to look through a telescope in order to see distant stars, so it is necessary for the questioner of God's existence to look for him through the instrument of scientific meditation. If one proclaimed or denied the existence of a distant star, and yet would not look through the telescope to see if he were wrong or not, his opinion would be worthless. He cannot prove his stand unless he has confirmed it through available instruments of knowledge. Similarly, no one may rightfully deny or positively affirm the existence of God unless he has practiced the methods of approaching him. Yogoda meditation is a telescope through which you can see God. Without it, you must rest your belief in God on unproved faith alone. With it, you can challenge anyone to disprove that God can be known. To control the mind by psychophysiological methods, to direct it Godward, to be its leader, not its slave. That is Yogoda, whether you give it that name or not. All life's labors are in vain unless you know how to shift your attention from failure to success, from worry to calmness, from mental wanderings to concentration, from restlessness to peace, from peace to conscious divine bliss within. If you have attained this control, then the purpose of life has been gloriously fulfilled. Paramahansa concluded with the following lines, which he had composed. Whether in the prison house of loneliness or heaven of blissful solitude, whether fettered by the chains of labor or resting idly in the peace of long-deserved rest, I care not if thou art with me. Whether in mosque, church, or temple, it matters little if I love not thy house and its creed more than thee. In the revolving wheels of factories, I want to feel thy pulsing, marching life. If thou art in the factory, I prefer that to heaven without thee. Whether in Himalayan caves or crowded subway, whether in jungles of Hindustan or of modern life, wherever we go, teach us to discover thee in all thy secret nooks. East, west, north, south, everywhere. Thank you for listening to this recording of Oriental and Occidental Christianity by Paramahansa Yogananda. May this timeless wisdom inspire you to seek the universal truths beyond religious boundaries and embrace the essence of spiritual realization. Remember, true religion lies not in form, but in the living experience of God within. Om. Peace. Amen.